Hello, this is author Laurel A. Rockefeller with the next video in my series from the Complete Data Files. Today I'm going to talk to you about houses and politics in binary society. And I'm going to take to you with each of these houses one by one. Now, instead of just reading to you what is on the screen, I know you can read this yourself, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more informally about each of these noble houses, and I'll take this one by one. First is House Gurun. Now, Gurun means, in the Manchu language, native land. And I showed this because House Gurun and the Gurun dynasty is the focus of the Legacy of Princess Xing-li trilogy. It is the longest ruling dynasty, and it's really a dynasty that has a lot of issues to it. The heraldry, of course, resembles House Xing-li a bit. It is really a royal coronet with the star on the top with the planet behind it. Now, House Miyu and House Shem. These are the two religious houses. And I get into why I chose what I did in the article about religion called A Matter of Faith, which appears at the end of the Great Succession Crisis. Basically, there are two religious impulses on planet Beinan that mirror what we see here on Earth. The first of these impulses is, of course, a patriarchal, monotheistic religion. And the people from this worship the Shem. Now, this is, of course, belief in a single male creator God. The other impulse, which you see in House Miyu, is matriarchal, it's polytheistic. That is to say, they believe in the goddess, in multiple goddesses. Now, the head of House Miyu is the planetary religious head. She's the high priestess, and it is the high priestess of House Miyu who will be called upon a lot of times to perform important religious functions, such as at coronations and so forth. House Tenar. The Tenarians have basically two focuses to them. The first one that you encounter are the Knights of Tenar. These are extremely talented, spiritually powerful warriors. And House Tenar sort of exemplifies the best of the warrior impulses and the warrior heritage from original homeworld, A672 E92 Quintus. So the Tenari Knights, if you want to think of them, are kind of like Jedi Knights. Although they're allowed to marry. They're encouraged to have families because you can't keep going. So this is a hereditary house. You need to have children to keep this going. Now, the other part of that are the healers of House Tenar. And the healers of House Tenar are led by the Abbess, who is addressed Your Grace. The Abbess of Tenar is, if you want to think about it, she is kind of like the Surgeon General of the planet. She is both a great physician and a great teacher of the healing arts. And is offered to her to oversee research, if there's any sort of plague or epidemic. She's the one who usually manages the efforts in order to deal with that. And of course, she has a very high position at court as well. She's a very politically powerful woman. The Knights of Tenar have a Binarian star sapphire that they always wear. And then they have a circlet that they're given when they are elevated to the position. The healers have a Binarian star ruby for their circlet. And you will see anytime a healer is killed, particularly by terrorism, which of course you see in books 2 and 3, you will see any sort of memorial will always have a Binarian star ruby as that sort of memorial emblem. It represents the healers. Now, House Balister. If you've read The First King, and if you've read Goodbye A672 E92 Quintus, you know that the very first dynasty was the Balistrian dynasty. That is, they come from House Balister. And the heraldry that you see here for Balister is the famous Bow of Balister, which is a legendary weapon. The Bow of Balister is kind of like Excalibur, only of course it's not a sword, but an actual recurved bow. It's a heritage bow, meaning it's made of actual It's a simpler technology. It's a regular bow like we think of in medieval bows. It doesn't have lasers and plasma and all sorts of fun stuff like that. It's a heritage bow. And the Balistrians started off as a guild of archers. And this comes from a bit of that German heritage, where you usually had guilds. The guilds were much more powerful in medieval Germany than they were elsewhere. And you had guilds of archers who would be hired out, essentially mercenaries who would go in and protect particular towns and communities. And so the Balistrians kind of started off as this medieval German archer kind of thing, a fusion medieval German archer and the famous English archers as well. Now, House Anna. In the Great Succession Crisis, being demoted from a particular noble house to House Anna is considered a supreme insult. That's because the other noble houses do not like House Anna all that well. Technically, they are a noble house. That is to say that people from House Anna have representation on the Great Council, which does not apply to houses Plover, Scannera, and Crofton. Those three are considered non-noble houses, and therefore they do not get representation in the Great Council. They have no say in their government. House Anna does. And that's because in banding together all these different so-called low-life professions or undesirable professions, they banded together and they, by working together, sort of like a trade union if you want to think about it, they managed to secure a measure of power, or at least a measure of say in their government, which others simply do not have. Now, House Brigid. Brigid is controversial. It can be considered a clan. Most of the houses consider it more of a clan. House Brigid members themselves consider themselves a house. However, membership is secretive, which is to say that you could be talking to someone from House Milieu. These are almost exclusively from House Milieu, or at least they're adopted into House Milieu. You could be talking to someone and never know that they were House Brigid. House Brigid has a sort of secret knowledge, if you will. And you see these secret societies or secret sects within religions all the time on Earth. And a lot of times the mainstream cultures will demonize them, and they'll find some reason to have a problem with these little societies or little sects. But most of the time, of course, these sects are innocuous and they're just doing their own little thing within their own little subset of whatever it is. But House Brigid sort of carries on a specific tradition and lore and ideas, specifically from High Priestess Brigid, who of course is Lady Priestess Brigid, and Goodbye A672 E92 Quintus. And there's a certain legend and lore about that. Please read about it in the complete data files. Next we go to House Cache-Marie. Cache-Marie is the merchant civilians, mariners. And of course, in Goodbye A672 E92 Quintus, you have a big conflict going on between Cache-Marie and Xing-li. That's because House Cache-Marie are civilian, House Xing-li are military. But they're very similar. Both houses are, in their origin, mariners. So you want to think of House Cache-Marie as being the private individuals, the private shipping companies that sail across the planet, bringing goods and people and other things. I mean, before the Benarians went to the stars, of course, they were ocean going. And the Cache-Marians have this wonderful mariner tradition of sailing. Almost everyone in House Cache-Marie knows how to handle a boat. And of course, Queen Constance, because her mother is from House Cache-Marie, has that same sea love, sea longing. So you do see that Cache-Marian impulse in both The Ghost of the Past and in Princess Anya Returns, because of that Cache-Marian heritage and that love of boats and the Amur River. And Cache-Marians just really love water and really love going off and being in the water. Even if they're advocates or attorneys, even if they're politicians and courtiers or royals, people of House Cache-Marie just love being on the water. And you will always see that sort of sea longing, or longing to be on the river, longing to be among it, to be on beaches and all this from House Cache-Marie. Now, House Slaby. Many of you probably know that Slaby is one of the family names in my family tree. I'm not going to say exactly where, but Slaby actually is an homage to my own heritage among Bohemian Czechoslovakians. And Slaby, of course, it means feeble or weak in Czechoslovakian and related languages. And the idea with House Slaby is that these are people who were not particularly militarily strong. You know, when House Gurun and House Tenar were off being great warriors and able to protect the land, and you were having all this warfare going on, there's a lot of Celtic influences in Beinarian society. These were the house that just stepped back and they were much less interested in it. If you want to take a Celtic example, we're looking at maybe the Dubonnet of the Midlands in England, where it just war was not their thing. So these became scholars. The best advocates or lawyers come from House Slaby. They tend to be politically neutral, so they're always called upon to be arbiters whenever the other houses tend to be in conflict. They're intellectuals. They're university professors. And they're extremely bright, talented people. Finally, you have House Xing-li. Now, as I alluded to before, House Xing-li has this great rivalry with House Kashmiri, which never goes away, by the way. Into the new era, House Kashmiri and House Xing-li do not like each other. And this, of course, creates the big crisis in Goodbye A672 E92 Quintus, because the two houses that are most capable of building starcraft and star destroyers, the ones that know the most about interstellar navigation and astroengineering, are the two houses that absolutely cannot ever get along with each other. The Xing-lins tend to have a military structure. They tend to be much more about war and weapons of war, and they're the great advanced technology. But they apply it in a much more military sense, and they have that discipline of a military structure to them that the Kashmirians just simply do not have. And this is one reason that they don't get along, is they're just so philosophically opposed to one another in how they think and how they work and how they organize themselves. So in Chinese, Xing means star, Li means strength, is the house of the star strength, the military mariner house. Well, that is, in a nutshell, all the houses on A672 E92 Quintus, and of course planet Beinan. Now I do want to mention that there are three non-noble houses, Crofton, Plover, and Skinera. And these three houses do not have representation on the Great Council. They are disenfranchised, if you will, from their government. And that, of course, as you will find, becomes a bit of a conflict in that. Because that not having a say in your own government tends to create a certain amount of resentment toward those who have power and authority. So, with all this in mind, you've now been introduced to the houses. Please go out. If you have not purchased each of the Peers of Beinan series books, I ask you to please do so right now. Don't wait. This is a fantastic series. It is extremely detailed, and I guarantee you will enjoy yourself reading the Peers of Beinan series. Until next time, this is author Laurel A. Rockefeller saying goodbye and have a lovely day.